after I'd summoned Aborimon, he told me about the purifying waters and the rebuilding of the temple. Following that, several months, perhaps a year and a bit following that, we reach the birth of the red heifers in Texas, the 5 perfect red heifers that are now in Shiloh in Israel. Before that, there's only ever been 9 of those heifers that have been born in history, in biblical history, and now there's 5 more. And people are seeing that as a sign of the end times because of that passage in the book of Numbers.
Welcome back. I'm here with Frater Eleftheria. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me back.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about how you started and kind of the dark-ish or darker path. It wasn't deliberately that way, but you were dabbling with the Goetia and things like that. You had made a positive turn toward the angelic side. Let's talk a little bit about those experiences and interacting with the entities that people would call angelic beings, angels, etc.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of different techniques that I used to contact angelic entities within Western esotericism. One big one is a ritual for what's called knowledge and conversation with the Holy Guardian Angel, which is detailed in a book called the Book of Sacred Magic of Aborimon the Mage, and in other books like Liber Psalmic. And this is basically about contacting a being which is kind of your higher self, but also not, possibly something outside you as well. And there's a process of merging with that being, the Holy Guardian Angel, and bringing spiritual awakening through that. So that was one of the big angelic workings that I did. And then the other series of angelic workings that I did were from Enochian magic. It's a system of magic that was developed by John Dean Edward Kelly in Elizabethan times as a result of a series of scrying sessions with a crystal ball to contact angels to get this magical system. And then that system was supposed to be used to deepen that angelic contact. So did a few quite big rituals using Enochian magic and communicated with angelic intelligences that way as well.
What were those experiences like? We talked on the demonic side about pains that you might, physical manifestations that were subtle yet real, where, glass would shatter, in some cases, water taps would drop and then stop, hearing thoughts that you're not your own. How was that similar or different when interacting with angels?
So the angelic form of magic, if you invoke an angelic presence, it's a lot more pleasant to be around. It's needless to say, it's more benevolent and loving, and there's a sense of calm or tranquility being in its presence. And there's a lot less going on in the physical world quite often. Angels can change the physical world if it's in alignment with God's plan, but usually it takes a lot longer for that to unfold, but the change is at a much deeper level of reality. So it's like
and more sustainable, I'm assuming. Yeah, much more sustainable. When demons change physical reality, there's strings attached, or it seems like it's going well for a while and then it's gone. Whereas, the things that the angels change are things that will endure. But I didn't contact angels to ask them for things. That's not really what they're there for. It's to give you wisdom, higher knowledge. And so my experiences with angelic magic were very internal, very inward looking, focusing on the visions and focusing on the messages that were coming into my head and then recording those. And you've been
focusing exclusively on this side since 2020, September 2021, I think is what you said.
Yeah. Well,
exclusively.
There was a period. Yeah. I'd say so. Around then, yeah.
And how have these interactions left you in terms of well-being, your life, how it's going, manifesting a reality that is maybe not as flashy, but is more conducive to peace and tranquility?
Yeah, well, definitely the influence that the angels have had on my life has been not so much what they can do for me in terms of my physical situation, but in terms of the wisdom that they've given me and putting that into practice, and the way that that's changed my life for the better. Just understanding the way that I'm part of something greater and understanding the difference between what I want and what I need, and just being in touch with the inner divine spark and being put in touch with that again, and how in a way that's almost all you need. If you can contact the divine by going within, then you're living a good life, you're living a fulfilling life. The divine needs nothing else but itself. So if you can touch that, then that's the goal in life. I think that's the goal of the spiritual path.
I don't want to ask you too many personal questions, but life can be, at times, day-to-day life could be extremely frustrating. I'm assuming you have like a full-time job, and there are conflicts in a full-time job and things like that. Have these rituals kind of improved that aspect of your life where you kind of just let things go? Or how is it manifested in kind of the more frustrating parts of your life, let's say? Now, I'm not to imply that your job's frustrating at all. I have no idea, but I'm just putting it out there.
This is where it gets a little bit tricky, because you can do things that benefit you and enable you to live a good life, and perhaps be seen as a more virtuous person by others, and win the respect of certain people, and develop enduring relationships with certain people. But truth be told, the ways of the world are pretty wicked, and a lot of people quite willing to do unpleasant things and make unpleasant judgments of people. And they often see somebody who is nice, quote unquote, as someone who can be taken advantage of, rather than someone who should be admired for building a strong character. So in practice, you might be in a really great workplace, but often the world can attack us for living a godly life, unfortunately. And, so we have to protect ourselves a bit, and it's hard to see the light in those situations. But even in the darkest situations, you can find God, because there's, in spite of all that, there's still an inner peace that goes untouched. And I guess that's what we have to rely on in those situations. So yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say that the things that angels taught me have, in the short term, have made my life easier. In the long term, when everything else goes up in flames, because that's how acting in the ways of the world gets you. In the longer term, I'll be spared that, and it'll pay off. But yeah, in the immediate term, there's going to be challenges to try and live that kind of a life in a world like this.
You mentioned either in this episode or in the prior episode that God had a plan. What do you think his plan is for you? And again, people who've been following me, I don't talk about God or Catholicism or anything like that, but I'm talking about, the creator, whatever he, she, it is, source, whatever you want to call it. What do you think your plan is, and how do you know that from interacting with these beings?
So these beings have told me very little about God's plan for me, other than the things that they're passing on that they want me to tell other people. So I still don't know as much as I wish that I did about that plan. I know that I'm supposed to be a spiritual teacher. I know that I'm supposed to be a healer, which is why I went and learned Reiki. And I know that I'm supposed to share these communications that these angels have given me to the world. Beyond that, I don't really know what the plan is. I pray about it often, but I still don't fully know.
And what do they want the world to know?
They want the world to understand the mystery of God. They want the world to remember that the soul of a society is in its spiritual traditions. And if you lose that, then it all starts to fall apart. And if you lose that in one form, it needs to be replaced in another form. And they want people to do good to each other. And they want people to know that love and universal love is more than just a nice idea within the human world. It's actually something that is emanating directly from God, and it's actually the glue that holds everything together.
And what do you think the purpose of your channel is, given that insight?
Well, eventually, to teach people all about that in a more serious way, to still touch upon esoteric topics, but as time goes on, I'll be introducing more of the new knowledge that these angelic beings have passed on to me.
Are there any particular entities on this side? I notice I deliberately didn't ask you this question in the last episode about demonic entities, but angelic entities, any particular angels that you communicate with most frequently? Or invoke, whatever you want to call it. I don't want to make it sound like something it might not be.
Yeah, the angel that I've probably invoked the most frequently would be my holy guardian angel, my personal angel. I work a lot with Michael as well, simply because, as I explained, talking about the demonic side, and when I sort of flipped, so to speak, I often find myself under spiritual attack from darker entities because they fear where I will go to on the path that I'm on. And I've always had a close relationship with Michael anyway. I was raised a Catholic, and Michael was actually my confirmation saint. So
it's my confirmation. It's my confirmation name too.
Oh, that's amazing. Wow.
That's awesome. Like the synchronicity thing, man. I'm just going to put out a bizarre theory. I don't know if it's true, but I think when you're beset by demons, things are a lot more obvious, and you kind of see a lot more. I think that angels operate at a more subtle level through animals, synchronicities, sometimes precognition, all three of which have been my experience. Now, look, I don't know, right? I'm just relating personal experience. But like that was the second synchronicity that we had. And when you said Michael, that's exactly what I was thinking. I'm like, yep, confirmation name. I didn't expect you to say that. But again, it's just another synchronicity that is probably meant to happen for whatever reason. Anyway, I didn't mean to go off on a tangent, but it was my confirmation name as well.
No, that's great. And it probably means that Michael's here with us in some capacity. But
I wouldn't doubt it. He was a warrior. He was a warrior too, right?
Yeah.
Oh, he is. He is a warrior. I'm also, my first job out of college, I was a Army officer. So I wouldn't be surprised. Anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off. You were talking about angels that you most often interact with. The first was your holy guardian angel. The second was Michael.
Yeah. And then I quite often interact with Enochian angels, but it's a different angel every time, because there's different angels that will be able to tell you about different things, different mysteries.
Now, when you do some of your rituals, do you use Enochian in any of them?
Yeah.
How do you, for folks that follow my channel, the episode just before this one was about Enochian. So with Peter Levenda. So just watch that. But my understanding from that interview with him is that Enochian is not like a J.R.R. Tolkien language where it's based on something. It's completely unrelated to anything produced by humans anywhere. And yet it still has its own linguistic structure. And apparently linguists told Levenda back in the 70s that you couldn't invent a cohesive language from nothing. But that's apparently what Enochian is. And I'm not implying it's by nothing, but nothing in human experience. And he said that there's not really a good way to... People know how to pronounce the letters, but they don't necessarily know how to pronounce the words. So some traditions will, when they're saying and invoking an Enochian word, they will literally, instead of saying cat, they would say C-A-T. Whereas there's others that might not know how to pronounce the word, but they'll just kind of using knowledge of how they pronounce the letters to pronounce the word. So what's your, in terms of your spiritual practice, how do you handle that?
Yeah, in terms of my spiritual practice, there's been different opinions on how to pronounce Enochian words. And in the OTO, the approach that people take is to, because they're trying to quite often turn it into something edgy and cool, in those kinds of circles, the pronunciation will be, like kokasa, like really like a barbarous language.
Yeah.
Yeah, like something really aggressive sounding. Whereas if you read, for example, Aaron Leach's work, he's done a lot of good work into the pronunciation of Enochian words, and there's a lot of softer sounds in there. And Aleister Crowley, for all of his flaws, he did do a recording on a kind of an older form of record of him doing an Enochian call, and his gives an idea of how the pronunciation might happen. So yeah, not shouty and more softly spoken, and some softer sounds in it is how I think it should sound. But having said that, there's something that Lon Milo Duquette said, who has done a lot of stuff on Enochian magic, is one of the preeminent people who's written about it and practiced it, also from the OTO. He uses this analogy of, like, if you're in the house and you see a mouse, and the mouse starts talking to you in English, but it's got a bit of an accent, or it speaks in a broken kind of a way, you're not going to worry about the mouse's pronunciation. You're just going to be impressed that a mouse can talk your language. So in that regard, pronunciation is not the most important thing, but if you want to cross all your I's and dot all your T's, I would recommend looking into Leach's research into that.
Okay, so those are kind of the flavor of angels that you've interfaced with. Are you still getting attacked by spiritual forces in this manner? Because you mentioned Michael was there to protect you in some way.
My headphones have just died. Maybe that's an attack. Who knows? But yes. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you actually better than... As long as you can hear me, I can hear you. Your voice has gotten better since you got rid of the headphones. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Well, then we'll dispense with those. The answer to that is yes. I do still experience spiritual attacks from time to time. That side of spirituality has a lot less access to me now because of where I am. But whenever I'm going to level up, so to speak, whenever I'm kind of on the precipice of entering a new chapter in my spiritual life where I've got more spiritual power, where I'm more in alignment with God's plan, when that happens, the spiritual attacks happen just before. And that's how I know that something big is about to happen, is because the spiritual attacks start. Sometimes certain videos that I do, like everything goes wrong technologically. And that's when I know, and it's always something about how to be devoted to God, or talking about the angels, or talking, something godly is invariably the video that I have issues with. And I always know that that's a video that they don't want out there, because it sort of undermines their plans for humanity. So, yes.
Well, the fact that your tech went bad, I can't even begin to speculate on whether or not that was, demonic in the beginning, but Michael just turned it around, because literally your voice is like 50% better. It's less like you're in a closet and more expansive and making better use of the acoustics of the room. So whatever happened there, it was a good thing. Unambiguously a good thing. As long as you can hear me well.
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So there was a ritual you performed at some point before the Son of Aborimon incident. And for folks who don't know what I'm talking about the Matt Brown X post. First, how long before that happened did you conduct this ritual? And then just tell us about the ritual and what you asked for. And by the way, and then just tell people where they can find the video of that on your site, because it's up there. So go ahead.
Right. Are you referring to the Sandalfon ritual? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So one of the angels that I worked with was Sandalfon. This is an angel who is one of a couple of angels who is said in the Judeo-Christian tradition to have started off as a human being and being elevated to the form of an angel. The other one was Metatron, who was originally the prophet Enoch, who got taken up to God. And Elijah is Sandalfon, according to Western esotericists. Elijah went up on the chariot of fire and became the angel Sandalfon. And so Sandalfon is an angel who can help spread a message throughout the world. And so I called Sandalfon, I invoked Sandalfon on the 3rd of April this year, and you can find the recording of that on my channel. And the purpose of the video was to show the first half of that working, which was something for my community. Like, here's a message from Sandalfon. Then the second part, which I did record but didn't include in that video.
Upload until after. Right.
Yeah. That was something that the second part was something that I didn't include because it was sort of personal to me. I was asking Sandalfon to help my channel to grow much faster than it presently was, because I knew that the angels wanted me to share their communications with others. And my channel had to grow a certain amount before that could happen and get enough reach, but it wasn't happening fast enough. So I asked Sandalfon to speed that up. And then the whole Matthew Brown thing happened. He appeared on...
Yeah, so April 3rd, when did the Matthew Brown thing happen?
Yeah, so I don't know exactly when he tabled the Immaculate Constellation report, which was his UAP disclosure, but he appeared on Weaponized towards the end of April, and that kind of got him well known in the UAP community. And then early June, I think it was, is when he posted on X where he used one of the images from one of my videos.
And we'll talk about that too, about Aborimon and all that stuff, because we have questions. Yeah, sure. Yeah, so that was the thing that really caused my channel to explode. And I'm still riding the wave of that. It's been taking up a lot of my time over the past few weeks, but it's great. But it's the fulfillment of what I asked Sandalfon for. And so when all of this had happened, I decided, well, I've got the footage from the second half of the video, because I just didn't bother to turn the camera off.
when I did the private part of the video. So I'm going to showcase what I asked Sandalfon for, so they can see that magic works. They can see it's cut from the same footage that I used in April, and they can see that what I asked for in April has now come about. So, yeah.
All right, so now a completely odd question from left field. Why is a former U.S. intelligence officer posting material from your site?
To advertise on Through a Glass Darkly, email throughaglassdarkly@gmail.com.
I don't know.
By the way, I asked Lavenda the exact same question.
And what did Lavenda say?
He, again, it's all speculation, but he said that perhaps the U.S. intelligence community wants people to subtly understand that this stuff is real and that there is a connection here. Other than that, nothing more beyond that. But I asked him a question. He was answering, he was talking about with Enochian. He's like, yeah, we asked all these experts and this and that. And he said, who's we? And he's like, oh, friends. Again, I suspect that he has some ties, strong, loose, or otherwise, with U.S. intelligence, right? But, he works for To the Stars Academy. It could just be a contractual relationship, but that question, I think, took him a little off guard. So,
okay. So, I'm not exactly sure. So, I think that Matthew Brown probably had a pre-existing interest in this stuff. And I'm not sure if he connected the Enochian magic to the UAPs because he was drawing parallels with what he knew from the Pentagon and what he was already interested in without knowing if there was a direct connection or whether he actually knows something about the intelligence community or the government contacting these beings possibly for hundreds of years and knowing that they're the same thing as these angels. I don't know what the case is. I think from what I've been able to gather from his interviews that he's done, his position is that he doesn't, that the powers that be don't want us to be aware of the occult side of things because ultimately that allows us to understand our full potential, which is, it's not a good thing for a group that is trying to keep people under control as much as possible. It's almost anathema to that. So I'm not sure that these interests would have much to gain in subtly letting people know that this stuff exists unless it was to let them know that they understand it and they can use it to control us. But I don't think that's what's happened here.
Well, he was a whistleblower, so it might be his little, what are you going to do? Attack me for saying, the occult is real? Good luck with that, right? Good luck. So it could also be, I can't recall if Peter Lavenda also mentioned the Collins Elite in some sense. You sure you're familiar with this, right? The Collins Elite concept?
No. What's that?
So there's a book called Final Events. It was written by Nick Redfern. And he interviewed a bunch of Protestant theologians, let's call it. I think one guy's name is Ray Boucher, still alive. And he interacted with a group in the U.S. intelligence community, possibly Air Force intelligence, I'm not sure. And they were very engaged in the occult. And they were trying to do things like recover information from dead CIA operatives, things like that. And they got to a point where they were too far in, and they couldn't stop kind of the trajectory of where they're going. They were kind of, again, this is just based on kind of his interviews and reports. I can't verify that any of it's true. But this is the faction that they say in the U.S. intelligence community is they're saying it's all demons and this and that. I don't think it's as black and white as that. I think there's probably more subtlety to it. I think that probably certain members of the intelligence community messed with forces that they weren't prepared to deal with or control. And as a result, became extremely conservative about not engaging in these practices. There's also a rich historical tradition in the intelligence community with this stuff. I mean, you mentioned John Dee and Edward Calley. John Dee, wasn't he the Queen's spy master and cryptographer? Yeah. Right? So that's a member of the intelligence community back in, I don't even know, 1500s, 1600s-ish. So
Crowley was a MI5 asset.
You're familiar with Project Stargate, right? The U.S. remote viewing program. I interviewed a bunch of those guys. So that stuff's real. In fact, I think I had it wrong. I talked to Lavenda after I talked to Lynn Buchanan. But Lynn Buchanan was on that original team. So there's definitely something to this. It might be they kind of keep it quiet. Again, I talked to Lavenda for an hour about the Nine and Andrea Puharich. You familiar with all this stuff?
The Nine sounds familiar.
They were a group of prominent families, like Arthur Young, the inventor of the Bell helicopter. I think Ruth Payne Forbes, something like that. They had a seance in Maine, very prominent U.S. families. And they interacted with discarnate entities that called themselves the Nine. And within a decade, JFK was dead. And every one of these people was 1 or 2 degrees of separation from Lee Harvey Oswald. Just nothing about like coordinating or talking to the Nine that had anything to do with the Kennedy assassination, yet every single one of them was somehow associated with that event. So there's a lot of strange connections with all this stuff. Like there's an intricate web that we don't really see, but that operates or controls or influences reality at a far more intricate level in terms of just people moving in certain directions that are associated with certain events. So anyway, I don't know where I was going with this. What were we talking about before I started taking us down this weird, strange path? Oh, the point about human potential and the occult. And we were talking about why Matt Brown wanted that to, or may have wanted that to go out there. So I think the intelligence community knows a lot more than we think, even with the Bledsoe case, the lady and all that stuff.
I've become quite familiar with that over the last few weeks.
And the question is the lady the same as Our Lady of Fatima, right? Is it the same as Our Lady of Lourdes? And what's the nature of this entity? Is it good, evil, neutral? I mean, it just says not apocryphal, this really happened to me. The night before I interviewed him, I, kind of looked out the window at dusk. I saw like the wing of an owl. This is the first time in a long, and again, I couldn't confirm it was, but it was a very large bird flying at night. And the night before, as I'm finishing his book, an owl a great horned owl specifically, starts hooting outside my window. And the moment I finish the last word, it stops. So there's something to it. I think there's also a lot of kind of deception around it from the intelligence community's perspective. But when they all show up at your house, there's a there. Same thing with your channel. If your channel feels like it's suppressed, it's probably because it is. in some sense, right? Because the stuff that you cover it doesn't, there's a lot of channels out there that are terrible that have 100,000 subscribers, right? But not your channel, even though you know what you're talking about. You have 17 years of experience in the space. So there's a level of control that is happening under the surface that we just don't all see, but in some way experience. So I know that I'm just speculating, but that's kind of where I think it, by the way, I reached out to him too. I wanted to interview him and no response.
Who's that?
Matt Brown.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Very few people from the intelligence community will talk to me. It's very strange.
Yeah, well, they probably feel that their life or their livelihood is on the line if they say the wrong thing, or even if they appear publicly to talk about that. And I think that...
But they'll talk to other people. Usually they'll only talk to people who are not in the United States, which is also a tell.
So they're worried about jurisdictional things, you think?
So the CIA can only operate outside the United States in most cases.
Oh, so it's actually the other way around.
For the CIA specifically. Like there's one particular individual I've been trying to interview for a while, and he's told me, he's just responded, I've said publicly I would stop doing interviews in 2023. But yet he's been on a Canadian show, he's been on a British show. I'm like, okay, you're still working for him, aren't you?
Interesting.
I can't say that with 100% confidence, but yeah, those guys, they steer away from me. But I also have knowledge and background that is associated with that sort of material. So I can read between the lines a little bit that, most people are just, they want people who are compliant, who will just eat up whatever they're telling them. They don't want people who are going to ask critical questions. I mean, you notice with some of the questions I've asked you, they're, I don't know, I'm sure people have asked you similar questions, but I try to get to a sense of like, what does it feel like? What are the physical characteristics? What's the sights, the sounds, and somebody who's telling you a story is not going to be able to consistently answer those questions the same way time and time and time again. So,
yeah, it's often vague and the specifics might change and things might add up. Yeah, I can see how there would be certain tells.
And Lynn Buchanan in particular told me that who worked in the intelligence community as part of the Stargate program, said that I would have been a pretty good interrogator. And I've had cops who follow the show say the same thing. And I'm literally just asking questions because I'm just trying to understand. I'm not trying to trip people up or anything. The audience can decide what's going on with that. So continuing on this topic, why that post? You have a whole video talking about this, but if you could fill people in on kind of the ring and because again, D was a cryptographer, so he has all these keys and combinations, and they're kind of the names of 7 angels, but there's a hidden 8th name, which is Aborimon. Can you lay all that out in a very, very quick, simple way that the average viewer can understand?
Okay, here goes. So I've spoken about Enochian magic, spoken about John Dee. That gives us some background to work with. So in order to do an Enochian ritual, there is a few tools that you need, and each of those was described in detail by the angels to Dee and Kelly, and very specific requirements for each of those because they contain names of God and certain symmetries and things like that. And so one of those tools is the Sigilum Dei Aemeth. And this is a wax seal, which is what the crystal ball sits on top of in the ritual, and also it sits underneath the table, under the table legs, the table that you're sitting at to scry, basically. And so the Sigilum Dei Aemeth is meant to represent the spirit that the working is conducted in, I suppose, of doing God's will and all of that. And it contains like a representation of the angelic hierarchy in the Enochian system. It's divided into 7 parts, and there's different levels in each of those 7 parts with different angels and different names of God. So that's about as simple as I can think of making it. But basically, there's different layers within that design, and the outermost circumference is kind of like the most high up layer in terms of the ranking of these divine beings. And there's 40 letters in that, and there's numbers and some other things in there, and there's a certain way of decrypting it to get the names. And John Dee would have had his own influence on the development of the Enochian system. He was a master cryptographer, as you said, so this is a lot of spy stuff that's being incorporated into the design of the sigillum. So I wanted to explain that diagram to people in detail.
And this is the circle that Matt Brown posted with the letters on it, etc.
Yeah. So
I Sigilum Dei Aemeth?
Yeah.
Okay.
Aemeth. It means the seal of the true God. And it appears in the Book of Revelation and some older books on magic, but I won't go into that now. But
it's still relevant, though. It's relevant that it appears there for reasons that you'll get to.
Yeah. So basically, so I did one video covering some of the other symbolism of the Sigilum Dei Aemeth, and then a second video just devoted to that outermost circumference. And that was where I demonstrated how to get the 7 names that everyone knows about, and then an 8th name, which only Aaron Leach had identified even existed. And he was the only other person who had successfully decrypted that name, and that was the name Aborimon, which has kind of sinister undertones to it compared to the 7 other more conventionally angelic kind of names. So that was the video that Matthew Brown decided to share with people, and he uses the word Aborimon in his X post.
But he misspells it for some reason, right?
No, I think it was the correct spelling from memory.
I think there were 2 spellings on it. Like it was written twice, and I think he misspelled it once.
Okay, I can't remember.
Yeah, I'd have to look, but you know, and it was like spelled with like an acronym.
Yeah, right. So that was the thing that was different. Yeah, it was spelled as an acronym rather than a word, which I think was perhaps a blind.
Yeah. So one thing about this Aborimon, can you explain what a Aborimon is? And then I have a question on how that's correlated, because you actually summoned Aborimon, right?
Yeah.
And then there was something that, am I wrong in saying this? Was there something that had something else related to kind of end times that happened the same week after you summoned Aborimon?
Well, there were things that happened in the months following summoning.
In the months following. Yeah.
But yes. Yeah, things that were quite spooky. Yeah. So I'll answer the first question that you had first, which is, who is Aborimon? Aborimon, from what I've been able to gather, what Aaron Leach has been able to gather, is because no one studied this angel before because it's been hidden for 400 years. But it seems to be the Enochian name for Abaddon or Apollyon, which is an angel that appears in the Book of Revelation. This is the angel who emerges when the 5th trumpet is blown, I think. And this is the angel that is sort of the vengeful angel who torments those who have not been sealed by God or have bought into the beast system, basically. And so
it's pretty appropriate for today's world.
Yeah. So it's kind of the appearance of Abaddon or Apollyon is part of the process of that whole world system being dismantled and being replaced by God's kingdom. And the word Abaddon or Apollyon actually means the destroyer. So this is a destroying angel, but destruction for God's purposes.
Now, what else happened in the kind of days, weeks, and months after you conducted that ritual?
Yeah. So with this ritual, there isn't actually any ritual to call up Aborimon. I had to do another Enochian ritual to actually ask the angels how to do it, and then use that to contact Aborimon. And I summoned Aborimon, and like many of the other angels that I've summoned, Aborimon gave me communications, things that entered my head that I wrote down, similar to the process of automatic writing, which people might be familiar with. And one of the messages that this is, so far as I know, this is the first time anyone's ever summoned Aborimon, so far as I know. And one of the messages was there was a lot of stuff to do with the temple, as in the temple in Jerusalem, and using the temple as a metaphor and that being rebuilt and all of that. And then there were things about purifying waters. That specific term, purifying waters, was used as a term to kind of encourage people to put themselves right with the divine because of what was coming, the shift that was coming. And I didn't know it at the time, but that exact phrase, purifying waters, is used in the Book of Numbers to describe the waters that have been mixed with the ashes of the red heifer, the perfect red heifer that gets sacrificed in order to purify the people in preparation for the building of the temple. And yeah, so the interesting thing about that is that after I'd summoned Aborimon, he told me about the purifying waters and the rebuilding of the temple. Following that, several months, perhaps a year and a bit following that, we reach the birth of the red heifers in Texas, the 5 perfect red heifers that are now in Shiloh in Israel. Before that, there's only ever been 9 of those heifers that have been born in history, in biblical history, and now there's 5 more. And people are seeing that as a sign of the end times because of that passage in the Book of Numbers and predictions about the building of the temple in the end times. So that was quite. Or
it could just be the apocalypse, right? Which does not necessarily mean destruction. It just means an unveiling, right? And we are most certainly seeing an unveiling, despite all attempts to stop it. Right. Take in the United States, Donald Trump and the Epstein list. Like his followers are not letting up. Like they elected him to burn it down. And the fact that he's not releasing this stuff, I think has many kind of MAGA supporters angrier than many Democrats. So I think now's the time of like a great unveiling. And there are other things, too, throughout all sorts of different traditions. So I interviewed Laurie Lothian, who's an astrologer. And many astrologers are seeing what they call new Pluto. And that's the last... When new Pluto came around, the Roman Empire collapsed twice. Right? So, the United States is kind of the modern inheritor to Rome, let's call it. And what we're seeing right now is kind of, I'm hoping it'll be a soft sort of thing, but I think the elites that run kind of the country are going to be exposed very soon, and that's going to cause some storm and drang, let's call it. But it's something that's necessary, that has to happen in order for, like you said, God to have, call it a more perfect kingdom on earth. Because right now, people who are running things are not humanity. They don't have the best interests of humanity in mind. There's also a book called Generations by Stowe and Howe, or I probably got one of the names wrong, that was published back in the 90s. And what they did is they analyzed cycles, historic cycles, and they found that every 80 years, there is a crisis. Right. So in the United States in particular, 80 years ago was 1945, which is the end of World War II. 80 years before that was the end of the Civil War. So we're in that 80-year period, which they call a seculum, in the time of crisis, the time when the existing world order falls apart and something new takes place. So then you get Bledsoe, for instance, who talks about apocalypse as an unveiling. And he talks about the red star Regulus when it aligns with the eyes of the Sphinx at dawn. He keeps changing the dates. Sometimes it's March, kind of Easter of 2026. He told me it was September of 2026, whatever. But regardless, you have all these predictions, prophecies, communications that seem to point to just an area of, or a period of tremendous upheaval. And we're seeing it right now, today. So I don't know where I was going with this, and I'm going to get complaints that, stop talking, I want to hear your guest talk, blah, blah, blah. So with all that, what do you make of what you saw with Aborimon? Do you think that, it sounds like it's kind of leading to the same sort of conclusion.
Yeah. A lot of the things that have come out of working with Aborimon, but also other Enochian rituals that I've done, like the Gebethel ritual, actually it's probably pronounced Jebethel, but anyway, that was another 49-day ritual that I did. And with both that and the Aborimon ritual, I'd noticed changes in the world, which seem to be an indication that we're living in more apocalyptic times. And those things can be seen as signs and portents of a coming unveiling of new knowledge, which is a really positive thing, and the coming of a new, more godly world, which is a more positive thing. But I also am just nervous about how other people see these things and then start to panic and mess up the world even more. So, it's something that I'm a bit apprehensive about when these sorts of
the keepers of secrets. The keepers of secrets are the ones who are going to suffer as a result of this. And because of that, they know that they're going to suffer, which is why they're lashing out in the more frenzied pace. Like, send more money to Ukraine, like keep the meat grinder going, bomb Iran for Israel, keep the killing going, send more weapons. So, and right now, the average American citizen's not paying the price of all the kind of warfare that our government is sponsoring. I speak with full honesty as a former, member of the machine, right? When I was in the military, that was the time that September 11th happened. It was the time that we invaded Iraq. When you look back in hindsight, you're like, why the hell did we do that? It didn't benefit us at all as a country, and it made things worse. So I think it's one of these things that there's going to be forces to be reductive. I know I'm being reductive, but there are forces of good and evil that are fighting, and the people who are kind of controlling power right now. And people are distracted, at least in the United States, with Republicans, Democrats. They're both wings on the same bird. It doesn't matter. It's a distraction. It's a battle fundamentally between good and evil. And right now, the Empire is striking back, right, to take a Star Wars kind of term. And things don't just get better. There's going to be winners and losers. And the losers are going to be the people who have systematically manipulated humanity for, since the end of World War II and gotten away with it. But with the distribution of new knowledge, and part of this new knowledge is just what we're doing right now. We're having a conversation. I would know nothing about these topics without talking to people like you. Like, part of this is my own education and understanding the true nature of reality, or at least a more accurate depiction of reality. So I think, it's going to get worse before it gets better, but it has to get worse because these forces are not going to roll over without a fight. So again, I'm probably, you said Michael was probably in this room, but that would be something that Michael would say. right? The good will be victorious. Humanity will win. But there'll be some darkness before we see light. Any final words for the audience?
Yeah, well, I think we are living in an interesting period in history, and we have seen the darkness. And, you know, a few years ago, when I made, it was a few years ago, 2 years? Anyway, when I made that video about why I no longer work with demons, and I was going into how I realized there was a spiritual war going on, I think we were really in the thick of it then. Like, the darkness was really suffocating, and our culture was starting to, and our media was starting to become, like, the darkness was so confident that it had won, that those cultural institutions were just starting to push it in everyone's face. Like, look how blasphemous we can be. What are you going to do about it? We've won.
Yeah.
We're in control.
We know you know that we're lying. We're still going to lie. And we're going to tell you even more ridiculous lies that you know aren't true. Absolutely.
Yeah. So it was like this hubris, and it was like they were at the apex of their power. And now I think they've almost overplayed their hand, and more people are starting to realize the truth, and there's an awakening going on, wanting things to be better, but also people questioning what they want to be, determining the direction of their world at a spiritual level, and what that might look like today and what it might look like tomorrow.
All right. Thank you, my friend. It was an absolutely illuminating discussion. And at some point, I'd love to have you on again as you continue to go through your journey and things shift and change. So thank you again.
Thanks for having me on, Sean. It's been great.
If you enjoyed today's video, please hit like and subscribe, and also hit the notification button so you can be notified whenever I post new content. Thank you. Now, if you're enjoying the channel and you want to support it, there are several things you can do. In fact, there are 5 things you can do. The first thing you can do is just buy my books. I got plenty of books out in the market right now, and I would prefer that folks buy a book rather than giving me direct support, because they get something out of it. They get a real tangible product. The second way you can support me is by becoming a member on YouTube or becoming a patron on Patreon. And just go to either site and it'll explain everything. The third way you can support the channel is by checking out my merch site, which is here. There's plenty of stuff that you can get to support the channel. And I'd appreciate that you have it and can wear it. Not only do you help support the channel, but you also help promote the channel, and I appreciate that. The fourth way that you can support the channel, and this is really easy, is anytime you want to buy something on Amazon, literally just go to the description below and click on any link, literally any link. The channel gets a cut of that, and it costs you no extra money. You just go through the link, as I'm part of the Amazon Affiliates Club. The fifth and final way you can support the channel is through donations. Now, I don't prefer these because it's more of an expression of gratitude, but you don't really get anything out of it as a subscriber to the channel. However, if you decide to do these options, there's 2 options. There's Buy Me a Coffee, which is a separate site, and there's also, you can go through YouTube with either a super chat, super sticker, or a super thanks. Again, I prefer Buy Me a Coffee because that organization takes less money than Amazon does. But either way, I appreciate any support you are willing to give the channel. So thank you very much, and keep watching. I really appreciate it.